because we were actually here for an hour already, and due to technical difficulties, we didn't capture the first hour. Happens. Yay, technology. So, but anyway, we sorted that all out, and our little band of compadres have come back together on this hangout here so that we can finish out the next hour, and you guys can have some cool stuff, hopefully, to check out and learn from. So anyway, I see. Let's see, we have Carlos. Hi, Carlos. Mr. Greg, Griffox, Jason. Hi, Jason.
Hi.
Les, that's actually me. I'm logged in from a second machine so that I can monitor this. So I'm just going to say hi to myself. It's kind of weird, but whatever. Nick, Mr. Nick, Susan, hi. And so we are back up and running. Yay! So maybe this time things will work out. So I'm going to go ahead and start up my screen share again and pop back over into DAZ Studio. Okay. So when I left to get my coffee, take a break, and come back and sort through our technical problems, we had just went through the imported figure, all this conversion stuff, and we'd moved controllers that showed up as imported morphs into a new group called posing controls. Separated those all out from the actual morphs so that we could save them properly, change them to posing controls, change the presentation from morph to pose, and all that groovy stuff. So that's important stuff that I don't think I covered that in the public seminar, because it's really not something that's immediate functionality. You know, and that the whole point of that was like, hey, this is how you do this quick. Here we're dealing more with the with a poser to DAZ Studio figure conversion and how to clean that up so that it can be something, you know, that you could sell as a new version of the product. You know, it's kind of appropriate. There's a lot of stuff to think about there. So what we have already done so far, I'm going to kind of try and recap what was in the last hour without taking too long with it. What we've done so far is we've loaded in our figure from our imported poser library. We converted it from the poser parametric rigging over to general weight maps, tweaked some weight mapping here and there. So a lot of this stuff you can see in the rewatch for the public stream from last week, by the way. I also touched on reweighting things like eyes that have hard weights where they don't affect stuff around them, because that's a special thing. You have to select the mesh for the eye and then flood that with skin weight corresponding to the bone that it goes to. Then the big thing, probably the biggest part of cleaning up a figure for conversion to DAZ Studio and really to be a product, you know, to be product worthy, is morph cleanup. And we spoke a lot about the difference between morph data in Poser and DAZ Studio, discussed in pretty great detail the differences between those two things, because, and to kind of try to recap that, Poser handles morphs per body part, and it stores them per body part. So you have vertex delta data stored in the CR2 with the blocks of code for each body part. Whereas DAZ Studio looks at the figure as a whole, looks at the mesh as a whole, and treats morphs as a shape change to the entire mesh. Even though it may look localized, it still holds, it still looks at the entire mesh. It will only hold data for vertices corresponding to a given morph that move. So it's not like it holds, you know, a copy of the model for every morph. It only holds the data for vertices that are actually being moved, which is kind of cool. But it does hold them all together in one place instead of per body part. That creates a number of little differences that can be kind of strange if you're used to working with Poser. So The next thing to think about with that then, and this is a bit of a recap, but I'm going to show this again anyway because it's kind of where we're at, and I wanted to go over it again because repetition is actually not a bad thing sometimes. We want to export copies of all of our morphs out of DS before we delete them, because initially when it comes into DS, it's going to create a group called morphs imported, and you're going to see morph data labeled corresponding to each of the body parts. So we want to turn that stuff on everywhere that we could find it, and then export it so that we have a copy of that morph for the entire model. So let's just take a look at, okay, we did mouth open, and I do believe here. I already deleted the aliases off, and those aliases were actually driving me. So we're going to need to set these manually real quick because they do work together. And then we would export that. Okay, I'm just going to use Scratch there so I can get the settings up. And I tend to use the Modo settings, Modo or Maya, because when I'm not working in DS or ZBrush, I tend to work in Maya. So I'll use these settings. The Modo and Maya settings are actually, I think they're identical. If not, they're really close, and they both work well inside Maya. So go figure. But I'll export with those kind of settings. I've already gone through and exported out all my morphs for this figure in advance. So I don't need to do that again. I do need to look at these. These are controllers for the eyes, and these are dead now. So I'm going to get rid of those. So at this point, I want to take all of these imported morphs, shift select them, right click, and delete them. I don't want any of those anymore. And here is where I mentioned before, when we weren't broadcasting, we were having some problems. I had mentioned this, that MorphLoader Pro is really, really handy. And here is exactly the most frequent use that I have of it, is if I'm converting something from my catalog forward to DS, and I've exported morphs, sometimes you can end up exporting a lot of those. And if you're just going to import each morph one at a time, oh my God, that gets so cumbersome. I hate that. That's been a big complaint. It was a big enough complaint that I had about Poser that years ago I actually had a guy who worked with me script my own multiple OBJ morph loader for Poser, and somewhere I still have that script. I haven't had to use it in a while, but it was just so cumbersome it drove me nuts that I actually paid somebody to write a script for that. But with DS we have this little guy. So we'll go Figure, MorphLoader Pro, and this is so cool. This is so cool. So we're going to choose Morph Files, and I'm going to go to Scorpius Dev, Morphs Exported. And you can see here, I've also grouped my morphs. I have them organized, and that's because I could just grab all the morphs at once if they were all in the same place, but I went ahead and organized them this way. That way I can do a batch of morphs that goes to a single group. So like these are going to be all my brow morphs, okay? So I'll hit that, bring all these in, and this is so cool. I love this, okay? This is just niftiness right here. I could take one of these, and if you notice, if you've used the GoZ method of morphing, you've sent stuff over to ZBrush via GoZ and sent back, you'll notice there's a lot of the same stuff. It's really the same dialogue in here that you'll see in the advanced side of the GoZ dialogue. So it's kind of nifty. It's actually should be pretty familiar looking stuff. So in here, I'm going to go to Property Group on one of these, right click, And see, these are all brow. So I'm going to go create, and then actor / brow is going to be the path that I put in there. Okay. And now I'm going to right click on the top line of this entry right here and hit save object configuration. And then I'm going to apply common object configuration to all. And when I save that, whichever one I had, okay, brow furrow left is what it was saved under. So now when I hit that, it should have that property group applied to all of these. So it just saves me from having to repeat that step over and over. So now when I hit accept, all of that should load. And it says my geometry did not match. That sucks. That really sucks. Boy, that sucks a lot. Well, if the geometry had matched, I probably had subdivisions turned on originally when I exported or something. Had the geometry had matched, all that stuff would carry over and form these nice little groups there. The geometry did not match, and so this was quite the magical moment. But that is how you would do that, just so it's been shown. Let's go ahead. Another thing that I would do sometimes, I think I did on this guy actually, is I sent stuff over to ZBrush, added some morphs, tweaked some stuff out. That's how you would mass load in a bunch of morphs, okay? So that you can load in multiple morphs at once and be able to control where they be able to set their placement and grouping from one place very easily. So that's kind of the biggest thing in creating or migrating something forward from Poser to Dash Studio. So I want to come back out here and show the copy of this guy that I have done this with already. And I think this one should be able to use that morph loader properly. Let's just try. I'm just curious because I know that I've done it with this one, so I'm just curious to see if it works on this one. So let's just grab all of that. I'm going to temporarily delete some stuff off here because I know this is just for the sake of demonstration. So let's just delete that stuff. And then, so we'll go to Morph Loader Pro, grab all these. So that, apply that configuration to all. Let's see, actor. There we go. Now we'll save that. Apply to all. Accept. Yeah, it didn't match on that one either. Well, it was worth a shot. So anyway, still though, geometry matches. There was something that I changed. Oh, I remember now. I actually altered my topology a little bit. Sorry, guys. My bad. I forgot that I did that. Before I did the conversion, I saw some things that I wanted to improve, and I made some actual topology changes. And at that point, you end up resculpting some morphs and things like that. So not a big deal. But at least you've seen that interface. I wanted you to see where Morph Loader Pro is, how that works, and a way that you can edit that and makes your life a little bit easier when you're doing, kind of mass morph editing all at once. So let's load this guy back in. There he is. Okay, and this is the final copy of him that'll be going out as a freebie, which it's kind of a heavy freebie, but there you go. I also made a number of changes, just improvements. So, and I feel like whenever you migrate content forward, that's a great opportunity to make those improvements. This was an older figure. This was going back a few years, and so as I looked at it, I could see where I wanted to change some UVs. I wanted to open some things up a little bit. As you just saw, where the geometry didn't match, I wanted to change the topology a bit. So there's a bunch of things that I did. I also, in changing the UVs, I changed the textures a little. And there's so many different things that come into play with what I did on this that you might not always do in a conversion. You might just look at something and say, yeah, I just want to move this forward. And if all you want to do is move it forward from poser to DS, then the things you're going to think about are going to be the skin weights, converting from parametric to skin weights. You're going to need to consolidate morphs, which means turn the morphs on, export them, delete them out from inside DS, and then re-import them with MorphLoader Pro, and then organize them. Once they're brought back in, you're going to need to set limits, make sure that limits get set on them. And then from there, it's just, if it's a piece of clothing, you're going to look at the rigging and go over your skin weights, just as if you were doing a new piece of clothing. That's kind of the bulk of it. We touched on changing from 3D Light to the Iray Uber shader, which this little guy you see right up here does that. And you can find that located under shader presets, Iray, Uber. And in the first hour, we did cover creating the custom action from this, which you do by right-clicking, hit custom action. That'll place a copy into your scripts, which you can then add to a toolbar so that you can just have a button for it. So once you apply the Iray Uber shader, then you want to go through and tweak things. So like on this guy, if I kick over to Iray, and I also want to make sure that I use some kind of a preset other than just the white preset that I'm using right now. So let's go to render presets. Let's grab the setup that I used for my promo images for this. And we're going to turn off auto headlamp. So there we can see the results that we have on this. And let's take a look at our settings here. There's all kinds of stuff that I played around with on this that, I mean, really, you're going to tweak that stuff out from product to product. No two things are ever going to be the same from figure to figure necessarily. So you may end up finding some settings that are a sweet spot for your own style or things that you normally do. That's pretty common. So, just kind of pay attention to that stuff. But that really covers the bulk of what you need to consider with a conversion. Now, the other side of this is packing it up for distribution. And one of the things that I have really come to love about DAZ Studio is that if you start the process properly, it's crazy kinds of easy. I would rather pack a product for DAZ Studio. I would pack 10 products for DS now before I would pack one product for Poser, because it's so much simpler. What that entails is having your folder structure together, and then, folder structure, where you're going to save everything to, and zipping it up. So you want to have that folder structure in place before you start your conversion, most likely. Although you could create that at any point in time, so long as you really haven't saved anything out just yet. So what I would do is go into, I'd go to wherever I want my work to be saved at. And DS will automatically create a data folder. Since this is an original figure, I have a folder called Figures, and this is kind of the standard, is there'd be a folder called Figures, and then inside that, there'd be a folder with whatever your vendor name is. And then inside that, folder name for your figure. And then inside there, you get all of the stuff that corresponds to the figure itself. Okay, so I have a little folder here, a little zip called product template that was given to me by Terry. And this is a template, product template zip for DAZ Studio that we use at CG Bytes. And it is very, very handy. What you can do anytime you're going to do a conversion or a new product is let's just create a new folder here called new product. Okay. And I will just unzip from this zip into where I want to place my new product. That's going to give me my folder structure. By default, since the most common stuff are for the female figure, under people, there's Genesis 3 female. For something like this guy, I wouldn't need people, so I would just delete that. So documents is where you'll find your README, where you place your README and all that. The data folder, DAZ Studio is going to fill that for you when you save your figure out. And then under figures, I've altered my zip so it already has my vendor name in there. So then under my vendor name, I would make my folder named for the product and just move all of these guys inside there. We really probably should alter that zip so that it says product name. So in fact, I might just do that right now and hand that to you guys since you're here. Not a bad idea. So let's just going to do that right now. So let's go inside here. And can we do this inside here? Yes, create folder. I am going to have to unzip that. That kind of sucks. Okay, so let's just do it like this then. So we're going to put all those in there. Now, it looks like we had a little bit of an error in our default zip there. Okay. Then let's see, runtime. And that runtime folder is where you typically are going to store textures. So vendor name, product name, cool. And if you store any templates, we hold those inside the texture folder. So let's see, people, figures, documents, data. Data should be empty. So, all right. So now let's just update that zip. Okay. Cool. And I will be sharing this. Let me stop my screen share for just a moment. I don't know if I can share files directly through here. I haven't tried that before, so we shall see. I'm just curious. No. All right, we'll make a link available for that probably the next day or so. It's just a zip, it's just a tiny little zip. There's probably a version of that already in your vendor tools. Or in the vendor package that Terry sends out. So just make sure that we get that updated for you guys. But that's another big part of making sure that stuff is Like if you're doing a conversion or a new product, you want to make sure that you have all that stuff in the right place. And it's just so much easier if you already have a template of it. And then once you have that set up, then you can just go load in that directory, even if it doesn't have anything in it yet. Just load that directory in and it'll all be there. So then you would save your figure out to the appropriate place within that library directory. So let's see. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to touch on with this. I don't think there is right off. The downside of doing this, one of the reasons I was actually kind of hesitant about taking on the idea of doing content conversions, but it's such a frequently asked thing that I couldn't bypass it. But I was a little reticent to take this one on because it's such a it's something that varies so much from piece to piece, from project to project, that it's very difficult to actually nail down all the stuff. So everything that I've kind of touched on here today has been specific to this product. That I could show you with this example. You may encounter some things that weren't covered here if you try updating some products or migrating some things forward. You may encounter some things that weren't covered because there are lots of different variables, lots of things that you can run into. If you do, you guys are part of the CG Bytes family here. If you run into something strange or run into something that I didn't cover, by all means, make sure you reach out to me, and I will do my best to help you get through it and help you, with whatever we can. So that should pretty much bring us to a close for today, I think. And if you guys have any questions, I want to throw this open for a while to talk a bit. And if you guys have anything you're working on right now that you have questions on, whether it's about conversions or anything else, let's get those going. And you guys can screen share back to me, which I highly encourage you to do. Sometimes the questions folks have will be very difficult to address just via text or even sometimes just via voice. But if I can see what you're doing, which is kind of part of the point of doing these Hangouts, if I can see it as you're doing it, then I can kind of go, oh, stop, don't do that, or go here, or hey, go there, go click this, and I can point and kind of really guide you in a much more hands-on way. So anyway, questions, comments, thoughts, anybody? Let's throw this thing open for a minute. Hearing crickets.
I know we have Carlos's problem.
What's that?
Carlos had a problem. Carlos?
Carlos. Yes, Carlos had a question about rigging on those pants. That's right. Let's take a quick look. Let me fire up a new scene, and we shall take a look at that. Okay, so let's just screen share again. Let's pop back in here. Okay, so let's grab the Genesis 3 female. Give her a moment to load in. Loading, loading, loading. She is loading in. Here we go.
Hopefully Carlos is still paying attention.
Ah, he says,
there you are. Yes.
Hey, Susan. Yes, Carlos is with us. All right, so I need to grab a piece of clothing. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. This is going to be kind of crazy, but it's okay. I'm going to send this over to ZBrush real quick and actually generate some very quick. This is not a product, but I'm just going to generate something to use to demonstrate with. That way we can go from like, 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds or something. So ZBrush is firing up. Hey, there we go. Boom. Okay, cool. Let's load this in real quick. Here she is. Oh, good. It brought over a subdivided copy of her too. So let's just come in here to the side. Let's grab mask lasso. Ding, ding, ding. And let's go all the way down here. Got that. And boom. And we're going to extract copy. Set. There's that. Okay. And I'm going to make a couple quick changes here to this just so that it is different enough that it actually is indicative of more what we would want to work with. So let's close holes. Then we're going to Dynamesh it. There we go. That's a bit high. Let's Dynamesh it right there. Turn on some symmetry. Just do a little bit of quick sculpting. This isn't going to be a real involved dealio here. We just clean some stuff up a touch. Okay. All right. And one last little thing here before I Z-remesh this. Keep hidden. Let's do return slice curve. That's what we want, slice curve. Boom, boom, boom. Just for the record, the reason that I took it into Dynamesh is so that I could basically smooth out down the down her behind, and just puff that volume out a little bit. So there's that. And Z-remesh, and we want to Z-remesh this down to about 2,000 polygons. And Bob's your uncle. Okay, cool. That works. Live with that. So I'm going to clear out my GoZ cache. Then we're just going to call this demo pants. And we're going to send it over. Okay, cool. I don't want to convert it to a subdivision surface right off. I'm going to hit accept. There we have pants. Yay. Okay. So I'm going to now clear my GoZ cache again. Close the ZBrush. And now I'm going to use the transfer utility. I'm going to take the Genesis 3 female as the source. Our target is going to be demo pants. Our projection template will be pants. We'll hit accept. Yay. Okay. And right off the bat, we can see that there's like some adjustments or something that might need to be made because I didn't really double check that. So let's just send this all back over to ZBrush again. Okay. And come on, ZBrush, work with me. I hate it when the program doesn't want to move fast enough. Come on, there we go. Thank you. All right, so let's pop that in there. Just do a little sculpting right there. There's her bottom. Okay. That. Now I'm just going to update this mesh over in Dev Studio. Z, update base mesh. Boom. There we go. Okay, cool. Now we're ready to roll with this. So I'm going to take a look over at Carlos' screenshot that he says here. So let's take a look. Redirecting, screenshot. Yes, that is precisely the area that that I was thinking about. And is this Carlos? Is this that suit that I was looking at for you the other day? I might already have a copy of this sitting here. So I'll few answers on that. I might actually just load his up here in a second. In the meantime, though, I'm going to take a quick look with the pants that I just sent over, and we should see almost the exact same problem. Okay, so there we go. That little area. So the first thing we want to do is look at our skin weights, and there's a good chance we're not even going to want to do a whole lot to them. And also, something to take note of is, like, you might not think about it because you can't select it in the viewport, but the thigh is actually 2 joints. So that's kind of an important thing to keep in mind when you're rigging clothing. Those thighs are 2 joints. There's a secondary joint that provides that provides the twisting for the thigh. It's part of the whole dual quaternion bending thing. It's just a fancy way of saying they put extra joints in. But if you don't address that skin weight, then you could be having all kinds of problems. So make sure that you really look at all those joints. See how right there we're already starting to clear up some problems just because of that joint, because we're actually working on that twist joint. Okay, so let's go back to our right thigh bend. Let's bend this up a little further. Go further. Now we're starting to get into that range again where we had that problem. Okay. So now I want to go ahead and make sure that I copy over my skin weights from one side to the other. So let's go back to the pants, right thigh bend. Get our node weight brush. We're going to weight editing, go to weight map symmetry. We're going to do right to left. Okay, so now I've copied my weights over. I might need to do a little bit more smoothing. So let's take a look at that. Make sure we take a look at that thigh twist again, because that guy can give us problems if we're not careful. Okay, and something that I do a lot, and if you attend these things regularly, you'll see me do this all the times. I use my timeline to set up little animations that I can use to check rigging. So I move down the timeline 10 frames. I like using a value of 10 because, you know, it's just obviously evenly divisible, and most of your parameters are going to run from 0 to 100, so it's analogous that way. You could use 100 frames too, and you'd be, you know, point for point on. So let's go in and bend our joint at frame 10. And the thing that I like about that now is I can arrow my way through and I can see anywhere that there's going to be a conflict. Okay, so I see conflicts happening in a number of places. And before I go any deeper into weight editing, what I want to look at next is if there are any morphs being used. Because a lot of times what I find is there's actually JCMs in the figure that will confuse you. It'll trick your eyes, and you'll think, oh, well, my skin weights are bad, and when really the skin weights are probably okay. And it's probably some compounded JCMs causing issues. So to find that out, let's select our Genesis 3 female and go to currently used. Okay, and right now we can see that there is a morph, P JCM thigh forward 115 right is currently at 78.4%. Okay, so let's just go ahead and bend that leg all the way up, which is going to go to 115. Let's go back to our Genesis 3 female. Okay, so at 115, that morph is engaged to 100%. So I'm going to send that over to ZBrush. Okay. And actually, before I do that, I also want to inflate those pants out just a tiny little bit. I'm still just want just a little bit more tolerance to those. Okay. And I'll send that back over. I'm just going to update the mesh. Okay. And let's get rid of that key. And now we can really start working on this. So let's send this over. Turn off my symmetry. So right off the bat, I want to make sure that I select my demo pants, and I come in here to this JCM and set its presentation, which you can do through this. You can go to the parameter settings and you can get to everything about it, or you could right click and go down and get to them through some of the menus that can open up. I want to go into its presentation settings, which under here will be type, and we'll go to the drop down, and where it says shape generated, we want to change that to just modifier shape. Okay. The reason you want to do that is because if it's labeled generated right there, then every time you load that clothing in, DS will kick out whatever morph data corresponds to that morph and will regenerate it, trying to copy it from the figure underneath. So it'll project that back in every time if it's labeled generated. If you change the label like I just did, then whatever you sculpt that corresponds to that will stick. That will stay in place. It'll still be driven by the morph of the same name on the figure, but it'll still be in place. So you want to start out with that, and especially on the thighs. The thighs are such a tricky area because they do bend. You know, they bend so far up, and they have a morph there that does a lot on them. So you want to start off with that morph. That's going to be a big, big deal. The other thing I want to do from inside my parameter settings is copy the name of that morph. So I just selected it and hit Control-C. Now I'm going to pop back over to ZBrush, and I'm going to just sculpt over that area a little bit. Then here I'm just going to make a little bit of change, Okay. And this little spot right inside here always kind of bugs me. If you look, the way the figure bends, when your clothing inherits that rigging, you're going to almost always have this strange crease inside here. The thing is, getting rid of that can be virtually impossible sometimes. And more often than not, you're better off trying to find ways to mitigate the way that crease looks than trying to just get rid of it. So here I'm just going to pull some of that out. Soften it, smooth it, so it looks as natural as I can make it. And I also try to think about, just how would cloth bunch up and things like that when I'm sculpting this kind of stuff. Just those kind of things really add a lot. Okay. And sometimes you want to get back to your original shape. So I'm going to store a morph target there and then just resend my pants back over. So then I can switch back and forth between the shape that's in DS and the shape that I've sculpted so far. I can see where I want to pull some of that back. Which I'll do with the morph slider like so. So once I have a shape that I think looks pretty smooth, looks like it's corrected it, relatively well, hit Control G, send this back over, and we'll come out of basic or out of advanced over into basic, and I'll paste that name that I copied right there. Then I'm going to go back into the advanced settings and just make sure some things get set. So we're going to set deltas only and preserve existing deltas to yes, and hit accept. So that smooths us out quite a bit, but we still got a little bit down here to do. So let's take a look at this area. It's always a tricky spot right there. I find that the polish brush can really be your friend in working with these kind of spots. So once we make that adjustment, we just come back over and repeat this process. That's looking much better, much, much better. Okay, so now we have our morph set up where we've replaced that joint corrective morph. We've changed it from where it was generated, where it was auto-generated, to being a saved morph. And now, if I arrow back down through, you'll see that's corrected a lot of its movement. We're still, though, oftentimes going to have somewhere some little offending point. And I think that's kind of where Carlos is at with his question. So when you reach that point, you've got a real choice to make right there. I feel like you can look at skin weights again at this point, but you have to understand that if you alter the skin weights, that's going to alter the shape of the item as it moves with its rigging, and any morphs that you've sculpted at this point that sit on top of how that rigging changes the shape. Well, if you change the rigging, then those sculpts are going to be affected. So things may not work right. You may end up breaking things you've already done. So what I will tend to do is I'll actually add a couple more JCMs to this of my own. So here I can see really between, now remember I set my keys at 10 frames, so I can see that between 60 and 70% where we really have our biggest issue, okay? So I'm going to, from this point where I know that leg should be at, it's actually not 60 degrees, it's at negative 74.52. For the sake of argument, I'm going to round down to 74, but I'm going to send figure over the ZBrush at this point, and I'm going to smooth this out a little tiny bit. And then I'm going to use my move brush to move that. I'm going to send this back over to DS, and I'm going to give this my own naming. This is going to be I forward -74 JCM right. And I'm going to copy that. I'm actually not going to do both legs right now. I'm just using this as a demonstration. But I normally would copy that minus the R at the end so that I would have that exact naming in memory. And then as soon as I finish what I'm doing with the right leg, I would go and do the same thing to the left. That way I can just stay nice and consistent across the two. But I'm going to go ahead and hit accept. Then I'm going to go to my demo pants, go here to ZBrush, turn that up. We'll see that the morph does fix the problem. I'll go into parameter settings. We're going to set minimum to 0. And morphs that come over from ZBrush automatically have limits turned on when they get here. So the next thing that I need to do is I need to freeze that morph to the bending of the thigh. So let's select that thigh. We're in edit mode. I'll right click its bend, go to ERC freeze. Oh, and I want to make sure also that my clothing is parented to G3 female. All right. So now I'll go to bend, ERC freeze. I want to uncheck that forward 115, okay, because we don't want that to be slaved anymore. It's already being picked up. That one's automatic. So this is the one that we made right here. So let's just accept that. Okay. So now when we select that thigh, I'm going to bend it and try it out. And sometimes that may be all you need. Sometimes adding a fix like that with one morph may actually ripple through and fix other areas too when it's really tight little stuff like that. So I would probably come in and do the process one more time, adding another morph right here. And then on really complicated stuff, sometimes on the more complicated shapes, something like this, I would just add one more morph and that would do the trick. Sometimes on really complicated stuff, I will actually set up animations that are baked in and slaved to the bending. And that's a tricky thing. Like that's something I might actually do an entire seminar on sometime because it's very tricky. It's not easy, but man, is it cool when you get it. So Carlos, I hope what I've shown you here kind of addresses the issue you're having. If you could just kind of let me know real quick if that looks like I'm in the ballpark of what you're having problems with, and hopefully I touched on some stuff that helps you there. That would be great. So if anyone else has any questions, okay, cool, awesome, glad I could help. Anybody else have any questions? Anything that we can touch on before we wrap up for the day? I see a lot of muted mics, so I don't know if anybody's actually saying anything.
I've got a few questions, but nothing that's relevant to any of this.
Oh, that's fine. Fire away with them. If it's something that's too involved, then I may make a note of it and do a quick video on it during the week, or come back and touch on it in a future session. But yeah, fire away, man. Let's hear what you got.
How would you sculpt like a wrap over garment? You're like a karate gi top.
Oh, okay. Yeah, something like that. There's a number of different methods that you could use for that. I can show you kind of quickly. I can do a real quick run and gun.
My first thought was like, do it so it nearly meets in the middle, and then just move the sides, move it across so it overlaps.
Yeah, that would be one way to do that. What I would do is I probably wouldn't even start with like a design sculpt. I would just use my topology brush and draw. I'm going to do something without sleeves here so I don't take a lot of time on it. But actually, you know what? I'm not going to use the topology brush. I'm going to do this the super, super fast, holy crap, this is going to be fast way. Let's do subdivide her a couple times. Pardon me. Oh, the temperature is dropping rapidly here right now. This is crazy. It was like 50 degrees earlier. Now it's like below freezing. Pardon me. Oh, Lord. I don't know where that came from. It was awful. So let's grab something like this. Let's just put some sleeves on it. Why not? Then go to extraction. And let's do two. With that. No. I want just the outer shell from that. Then modify topology, delete hidden. Okay. Then from here, I'm going to turn on symmetry. And let's go into, oh, so many different things we could do. So many different things we could do. Let's dynamesh this real quick. Actually, before I delete that stuff, let's go ahead and inflate the inside of this so we have enough thickness that Dynamesh won't freak out. So we'll do that with deformation. We'll go to inflate. There we go. Polish the whole thing just a touch. Now let's go to Dynamesh. And just so that it doesn't want to close this up here, let's relax this back a little bit. Okay, maybe a little more. There we go. And did it retain my groups? Yes, it did. Cool. So I Dynamesh that, but it retains my groups, and that's important. I Dynamesh it so that I can get in here and do some sculpting. You know, pull some stuff out of this. Just have a little bit of fun with it. Okay. But then there we go. I'm going to only keep that outer group, and then we're going to turn on symmetry. So that, and then we're going to Z-remesh this. Let's take this down to like 2,000 polys. So there we have, that's not a bad start. Let's take it down by half again. And then I'm going to set it the same and hit it a couple times because I like the way that'll refine my topology quite a bit. So then there's a number of different things we could do to create kind of an overlapping garment like that. Right off the bat, I'm going to make 2 poly groups so that I can work on this stuff really easily. Let's grab this one, mask off an area, and then say from the front, we could just pull that over. And we can always project it to make sure that it gets really close and form-fitting if we wanted. Or we can, I like to kind of start with things form-fitting and then sculpt out from there. Now I'm going to invert my masking, and let's just move brush. Yeah, a little bit of that, okay. Let's project that. Might need to change my projection settings a little bit. Say a little bit more. There we go. Thank you. And then just pull that back out. So let's invert that mask. Get that a little, invert it again. Okay. Slightly polish it just a little bit so we get a little relaxing going on there. And then let's just kind of dust over the surface a little bit with an inflate so that we get a little breathing room in some areas. Something like this, kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's one way that I would go about doing that. There's a lot of different things I would consider, like if it has lapels, if it has different kinds of trim that I want to use, if it has flaps and different types of panels. You can get really crazy with details, and sometimes those details will guide the way that you want to model something, because if you think about the details in advance, then you'll make different choices. Like you may extrude things so that it leaves specific edge loops in places that will allow you to get types of trim you might want. Stuff like that. You know, those are considerations, but just in kind of the lowest level approach of how would I do something that overlaps, this is just a quick example of a way to do that.
Okay, great, thanks.
Sure. Anybody else got anything you'd like to toss out or take a look at or talk about for a minute? Anybody? Going once? Going twice? And okay, so I'm going to kill the screen share. I want to thank you guys for being here and hanging out, checking stuff out. Sorry that the first half of today, it was cool for everybody who was here. It was truly, completely, and utterly private today because it, there was a little technical difficulty that prevented it from streaming properly. But everyone was here, and you guys hopefully picked up some stuff. And then we did get to recap it in the second hour. So anyway, glad you guys could be here. Thanks, Jason and Terry and all the folks at CG Bytes for putting these things together and making this something that hopefully folks can learn some stuff from and really dig seeing. I've seen a nice burst of new stuff from everybody recently, and that's been very cool. So anyway, that kind of brings us to a close for this week. So next week we will be doing a public seminar because we're alternating each week, and we'll be starting on the subject of geoshells. That's a fun one. That's some neat stuff. There's some nifty little things you can do with those. And I really like those. I think for a lot of folks who are interested in finding ways to make some cool but maybe easier to make products, geoshells open a door that is really cool. There's just some neat stuff that we can do there. And we're going to touch on that next week. And next week, the only software you'll need is DAZ Studio and a photo, an image editor like Photoshop. So that's going to be really cool. I'm going to show you how to make some very cool stuff with that. So anyway, I think that wraps us up for the day. One last call for questions, comments before we bring it to a close. Anybody?
Thank you, Les.
Thank you. So, all right, guys. Well, I will see you folks hopefully next week. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the session.
Sure. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.